At him, and she looked at Bill and Karen, my friends, and she said, well, I don't know what to decide. If I make the wrong decision, you'll never talk to me again. Literally, not figuratively as she was thinking, but quite literally. Well, my friend looked at the doctor and said, you know what he said. He said, you can't take his plumbing. Do not take his plumbing. He will sue you. And so they did what I asked them to do, and I got lucky. The other 29 men aren't, as far as I know, they're not around anymore. That's what research does. They're just trying to figure stuff out. They're not giving you any hope. Sometimes you get through, sometimes you don't. Any questions about this? So this is the paternalistic principle. We can apply it to government, but we're going to go into mental ethics. I want to apply it to the physician. This will lead us to the next slide. Yes?
Quick question. So, with Rousseau, that was the beginning of the libertine movement.
In the French, for the French Revolution. It just spread right across Europe. Europe was done. Europe was done. So the oath has three parts. The oath of initiation you won't be tested on, but I need to explain it to you. It's a pledge of loyalty to the teacher. When you signed up for the class, you in essence did that, but it wasn't formal for me. That's why you show up here and don't end up going to someone else's class. There was an oath of secrecy, no sharing of medicine with lay people. What would you understand? I remember when they diagnosed me finally with cancer, they had me going to see Howie Beck. He's an ENT, ear, nose, and throat. He's a good friend of mine. My kids played together. And I walk in there, and Howie's, I probably should, he comes walking in like this one day, and I said, hey, Howie, how we doing? He said, oh, I'm sorry, we're meeting under such unfortunate circumstances. I said, did you bury me? He said, you're in deep. I said, just how deep a shit am I in anyway? He said, well, he says, let's just say you had an 80% chance to live. When the cancer, they call it metastasizes, when it moves, you cut your chances in half. I never shared this with you. So I said, well, you know, 80 divided by 2 is 40, and I took calculus in high school. I'm a happy guy. We'll just add 10%. I have a 50-50 chance. And he said, no, you have less than 5%. Really? So I said, I want to know their opinion, because I asked him what he was going to do. He's the first one. He said he's going to take my plumbing. So he's a cutter. He's from surgical trainee from Mayo. So he suggests Mayo. So I go out to Rochester, Minnesota. To get there, I have to go from northern Michigan to Chicago, wait a couple hours, get a plane that goes to Rochester, Minnesota, and I got to bring my jacket with me, all my information. It's got my name on it. It says, do not open. It's got my name on it. It's trying to tell me not to open. So I get to Chicago, and I got a couple hours wait, and I'm looking at this packet thinking, well, I don't even know what kind of cancer I have. So of course I open it, and I go inside, and it says T3N2, tongue-based squamous cell carcinoma. Well, I figured the tongue-based must have meant it was here, but what's squamous cell carcinoma? So I found a computer, and I found out there's 3 kinds of skin cancer. There's basal cell that you get all over your face when you don't wear enough sunscreen. It's called stupid cancer. It doesn't go anywhere, and it has to be surgically removed. And then there's squamous cell, which could be deadly if it's left unchecked, because it will eat you up. And then there's melanoma, which will kill you. Very few instances where it isn't. I have a friend who's had 2 of them removed, and he's still alive amazingly. Everyone's amazed, all the medical people I know. So now I know I have skin cancer, and I think, what's T3N2? Well, it's got 2 modules, and I'm in stage 3. How many stages in cancer? 4. So I go to Mayo, and we have a not pleasant discussion, and I want another opinion, and that's when I end up down at U of M. 30 days later, I'm in stage 4 cancer. If I hadn't looked, I wouldn't have known. Nobody was going to tell me. These were friends of mine. It's not like they refused. They just didn't see the reason. Well, Larry, you have squamous cell carcinoma. Oh, great. I have squamous. Did you know I have squamous cell carcinoma? Did you know I had squamous cell? I could tell everybody I had squamous cell carcinoma. Libertarian political philosophy opens the door to what we're going to call patient rights, to be informed and to give their consent.
What would have been the reason not to share that?
Well, because it wouldn't make any, what difference would it make to most people? Some people, if they want to know, and I firmly believe physicians, if you'd asked them before this became Supreme Court law in 1990, they'd have told you. I mean, maybe you'd have understood it, maybe you wouldn't. My mother's dying of cancer. Within 2 months, she's dead. Just before she's dead, they do the second surgery. We go in to see her physician, and he's explaining this and that. Her nickname's Babs. He says, Babs, you have any questions? She looks at me, and she said, do you have any questions? And I looked at the doctor, and I did this. I said, she in stage 4? He said, yeah. I said, we don't have any questions. But I knew this because I had asked questions. I understood the law. This happened in 1996. The federal law was 1990. Go ahead, Rachel.
I was just going to explain that usually they don't tell you this is a stress.
Stress, yeah.
Stress you out, it makes it worse.
And
I just don't understand it because I've grown up in the medical field, so.
Well, some tell, some
Yeah.
don't. There's only some stupid.
And they do understand your autoimmune system goes into the basement as soon as you get tense, as soon as you get depressed. It just, I'm not sure why that would do it, but your autoimmune system, and your autoimmune system is your natural guard. Look, I probably shouldn't say this to you, but you're all going to get cancer.
Technically, yes.
We all have a technique.
80% of you will never know it because your autoimmune system will keep it at bay. 20% of us, the battle's on. So your autoimmune system is key. It's one of the key components to your health. Tension, things like that, put it right in the toilet. It's not like it can't come up again. I've watched people get healed just through laughter. It doesn't happen real often, but I mean, they videotape this. People just sit there and laugh and laugh and laugh at these old comedy, whatever, and next thing you know, doctors say, well, I'm not sure why that happened, but it happened, and good for you. You seem to be okay. There is a code of conduct that you have specialized medicine even back then, pharmacology, dietetics, and surgery, and you didn't mix fields, specialized medicine like now. So you go to a doctor, you go to a GP, a general practitioner, and they examine you and they said, I need you to see a specialist. You go to a specialist. And if that doesn't work, they'll send you to another specialist until they finally narrow down the range of what's going on in you. There's also 2 prohibitions, no euthanasia and no abortions. And then finally, the core principle, no harm to the patient. So you will have to know this oath. You will not have to know the oath of initiation, but the code of conduct and the core principles, people. By the way, if this automated slide doesn't work for you, there is a PowerPoint that's attached to it, so you ought to be able to work it from there. This challenges the Hippocratic tradition that physician always knows best. It challenges in this way, the way that benefits are assessed. This is the beginning of patient rights. It challenges the principle of medical paternalism. There is more to ethics than just producing good results. It gives rise eventually to a patient bill of rights, places the welfare of the individual above the interest of society. I cannot emphasize enough patient rights. You grow up in a time when patients have rights. You go to the emergency room and the first thing they're supposed to do is take out a sheet of paper and say, do you want this done to you, this done to you, this done to you, this done to you? Because anytime you go under a surgical experience or even just spend time in a hospital, you can get very sick and they want to know how to treat you. It's called final directive. In the military, I forget.
It's basically your last will.
Yeah, it's your last will and testament.
Like with the VA professor, I had to have mine filled out. My wife had to be there, just to cover expenses.
In fact, if someone reminds me, I'll bring one in. It's always in my car in case something happens. And they make sure they do that, and that guards your rights, what you want done and what you don't want done to you. And this all goes back to 1698 and libertarian political philosophy. It wasn't for that change in how we did things and became a libertarian democratic society, you wouldn't have the rights that you have today. And by the way, it's not the government's job to protect your rights. That's why the Constitution limits the government. You need to protect your own rights. You know the difference between freedom and tyranny? It's a thin line that's so thin you almost don't see it. I said that wrong way. I meant totalitarianism and freedom. This thin line is called tyranny. You have to protect your rights. So you go to a doctor and you say, I want a second opinion. If they're not really into it for you, you need to go ahead and demand it anyway, people. Know what's going on in your life so you can give informed consent to whatever procedures. I remember when I went through the hernia surgery, the doctor came in with a little coloring book and sat down with me and opened it up, and there was a picture of a guy. And then he'd show me where they're going to make the incision, another picture, and then another one, and another one. He says, do you understand what I'm saying to you? And I said, perfectly. He says, do you want me to do it or not? I've been informed, and I gave my consent. It's going to come up in the abortion modules in a case called Webster versus Reproductive Health Services in 92. Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Informed consent. You have rights that you never had before. And if you don't exercise them, people may not exercise them for you. Thank you. So these are codes that challenge the Hippocratic tradition. You'll see these on your quiz as well. In 1947, when World War II was over, and we saw what the Nazis were doing in terms of research, just using people as guinea pigs to see what would go on. They initiated what's called the Nuremberg Code of 1947. Human research was controversial, utilitarianism versus respect for persons. How do we allow for research and still protect patient rights? And so out of the Nuremberg Code, what happened is we decided that the only kind of surgery that would be allowed that would require informed consent of the patient would be research. Okay, not, do you understand the difference between research and medicine? Research is looking for answers. There's no promise in research. You see once in a while on the TV type 2 diabetes, and they're looking for people to volunteer. They're not promising you anything. It may work, it may not. They're just doing research. They're trying to figure out what works. Once they know what works, then they practice medicine with it. So the 47 code, the Nuremberg Code in 47, allowed for research, but only with informed consent of the patient, where before that hadn't been allowed. It was a public document of international law, but it had no teeth to it. So it's a statement of belief that patients should have rights. Patients who are going to go under or undergo research experiments. Okay? A year later, I call this the Geneva Declaration, 1948. They decided to make it international law. So it's the same code, informed consent for research. Now it's international law instead of an international document. The problem with it is countries will not surrender their autonomy to let another country or a judicial body judge its citizens. So there's something called The Hague. It's a tribunal in Europe, and they have the authority if someone wants to submit to them, but for the most part countries won't submit, or they won't defer to The Hague's power. But at least now it's international law. In 1973, the American Hospital Association encodes the Patient Bill of Rights. This is not doctors, this is a hospital association. That's why when you go in the emergency room, they want to know what final directives are, and you get to make that choice.
Professor, with the World Medical Association Declaration of Geneva and dealing with the other countries, unless you're part of that, then it doesn't, the same way how the Geneva Code works.
Sure.
So if you're not part of that convention or that declaration, it doesn't really matter with that country, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
The AMA, the American Medical Association, finally in 1980, doctors, they incorporate the same core principles, informed consent. And this becomes then the Patient Bill of Rights. Now, this all rests on a Supreme Court case that happens in 1990. You're going to see it more than once, but I'll bring it up here now. This is a case of a young college student, your age, and she's in an accident, and she becomes, she falls into an irreversible coma, or what we call a persistent vegetative state. And she's just young, 19, 20, 21. And her father, when he visits her in the hospital, realizes that, you know, there's no hope, there's no recovery for this, not now. And she'll just, $1 million baby, she'll just be like this forever unless we have some breakthrough. So he petitions the court to take her off of life support. And the court says,